Why 12 jets matter more than 100 tanks. Why is China more worried about 12 fighter jets than 100 tanks? When news broke that the Philippines was in talks to acquire F-16 Vipers, Chinese officials immediately issued warnings, concerns about regional stability, accusations of militarization, calls for restraint. But when the Philippines bought armored vehicles, artillery or naval patrol boats, China barely responded. Diplomatic silence. So what makes 12 aircraft worth diplomatic pressure that 100 tanks do not trigger? The obvious answer: fighter jets have range. They cover territory. They project power beyond borders. But that is only the first layer. The real answer goes much deeper. What makes the Viper different? Right now, the Philippine Air Force operates FA-50 Golden Eagles, Korean-made light fighters. Good aircraft, capable trainers, armed with basic air-to-air missiles and precision bombs. Maximum combat radius, 400 kilometers. Top speed, Mach 1.5. Radar, pulse Doppler, limited range, cannot track multiple targets simultaneously in complex environments. The FA-50 was never designed for high-intensity air superiority. It handles light attack missions, counterinsurgency, pilot training, border patrol. The F-16V Viper is a different category of weapon entirely. Combat radius, 850 kilometers, nearly double the FA-50. Top speed, Mach 2+. But speed and range are not what makes China nervous. APG-83 SABR radar, active electronically scanned array. This radar tracks dozens of targets simultaneously at extended range. It detects stealth aircraft better than older mechanically scanned radars. It provides targeting data for beyond visual range missiles. AMRAAM, advanced medium-range air-to-air missile. Fire and forget capability, range over 100 kilometers. The FA-50 cannot carry this weapon. The F-16V Viper is designed around it. Link 16 Tactical Data Link. This system shares radar data, targeting information, and threat warnings across the entire network in real time. F-16 Vipers do not fight alone. They fight as nodes in a networked battle space. All-weather day-night capability. Advanced targeting pods, precision-guided munitions for ground attack, anti-ship missiles. The Viper is a multi-role platform that can conduct air superiority, strike, and maritime missions simultaneously. The FA-50 can defend Philippine airspace against prop aircraft and light intrusions. The F-16V Viper can engage advanced fourth-generation fighters, conduct suppression of enemy air defenses, strike maritime targets at extended range, and operate as part of a joint coalition force. This is not an incremental upgrade. This is a generational leap in capability. But capability alone does not explain Chinese concern, because the Viper's technical specifications are not the real threat. Interoperability. This word appears in every defense agreement, every joint exercise, every strategic assessment. But what does it actually mean? At the basic level, interoperability means your radios work with allied radios. Your aircraft can communicate with allied aircraft. Your systems speak the same language. The FA-50 has limited interoperability with US forces. Different radar systems, different data links, different weapons. During joint exercises, FA-50s operate in separate sectors. Coordination happens through ground control, not direct aircraft-to-aircraft networking. The F-16V Viper uses the exact same systems as the US Air Force. Same radar family, same data links, same weapons, same training syllabus. In combat, this means a Philippine F-16V can see what an American F-35 sees, can receive targeting data from a US Navy destroyer, can coordinate strikes with Australian F-18s, all in real time, all through automated systems. Taiwan operates 66 F-16Vs, upgraded to the same standard the Philippines is considering. During exercises with US forces, Taiwanese F-16s integrate directly into American formations. No translation layer, no coordination delays, seamless operations. When Taiwan and the United States conduct air defense exercises, they do not operate as two separate air forces coordinating through liaisons. They operate as a single integrated air defense network with pilots from 2 countries. For the Philippines, this matters in every scenario. West Philippine Sea incident escalates. Chinese aircraft approach Philippine airspace. Do Philippine fighters scramble alone and hope for coordination? Or do they plug directly into a regional air defense network that includes US assets already in theater? Interoperability cuts response time from hours to minutes. It multiplies effectiveness by factors of 3, 5, 10, depending on the scenario. 12 F-16Vs with full interoperability are more valuable than 50 advanced fighters that cannot network with allies. Because in modern conflict, isolated capability loses to networked capability every time. And this is what China sees, not 12 Philippine aircraft, but 12 Philippine nodes in a much larger American-led network. But even interoperability is not the deepest layer, because the real issue is not the aircraft or the network, the first island chain. This line runs from Japan through Taiwan, the Philippines, down to Borneo and into the Indonesian archipelago. For China, this chain is a strategic cage. Every Chinese naval vessel leaving port must pass through gaps in this chain to reach the open Pacific. Every gap is monitored, every passage is tracked. Chinese naval bases, Hainan, other South China Sea facilities. Chinese submarines based in Hainan need access to deep Pacific waters to operate effectively. But to get there, they must pass through straits. Luzon Strait between Taiwan and the Philippines, Bashi Channel. Balintang Channel. These passages are relatively shallow, easy to monitor, difficult to transit undetected. Once through, Chinese submarines reach the Philippine Sea, deep water, harder to track. The Philippines sits at the center of the southern first island chain. Luzon specifically controls access to multiple critical straits. Basa Air Base. Pampanga. Central Luzon. This is the most likely location for F-16Vs if the deal proceeds. From Basa, F-16Vs can reach the Taiwan Strait in under an hour. Cover the entire Luzon Strait. Patrol the northern approaches to the South China Sea. Reach Scarborough Shoal in 20 minutes. In a Taiwan contingency, Chinese forces would need to secure their southern flank, prevent interference from the south, ensure supply lines through the South China Sea remain open. Philippine F-16Vs based in Luzon force China to account for a potential threat from the south. Not because the Philippines would necessarily intervene directly, but because the capability exists and is interoperable with US forces that would intervene. China's strategy relies on anti-access area denial. Keep American forces far from the fight. Make intervention too costly, too risky, too slow. This works when China can concentrate forces against a single axis, Taiwan. But if US forces can operate from multiple locations, the A2AD bubble becomes porous. US forces in Japan, Guam, now potentially operating seamlessly with Philippine F-16Vs from Luzon. China cannot defend against all axes simultaneously with the same effectiveness. For the Philippines, this geography is both asset and liability. Asset because it gives the country strategic weight beyond its military size. Liability because it makes the Philippines strategically relevant to conflicts the country might prefer to avoid. But in the West Philippine Sea, the geography works entirely in Philippine favor. Chinese forces operate at the far end of their logistics chain. Philippine F-16Vs operate from home bases minutes away. Chinese Coast Guard harasses Philippine fishing boat near Scarborough Shoal. Under current capability, Philippine response takes hours. FA-50s have limited combat persistence. No air-to-air refueling. Short combat radius means limited time on station. F-16Vs from Basa reach Scarborough in 20 minutes. Extended combat radius means hours on station. Refueling capability means even longer presence. Advanced radar means tracking every Chinese vessel and aircraft in the area. The goal is not combat, the goal is deterrence, making the cost of harassment too high, making the risk of escalation too unpredictable. Geography explains why 12 jets based in Luzon matter more to Chinese strategy than 100 tanks anywhere in the Philippines. Because those 12 jets sit at the choke point of Chinese naval access to the Pacific. What this really means. So why is China more worried about 12 F-16 Vipers than 100 tanks? Layer 1. The aircraft itself. Generational capability leap multi-role. All-weather networked. Beyond visual range combat. Layer 2. Interoperability. Not just Philippine capability, but Philippine integration into a much larger allied network. Layer 3. Geography. Luzon sits at the center of the first island chain. Controls access. Complicates Chinese strategy. But the fifth layer is the strategic equation itself. China has spent 30 years building capability to deny the United States access to the region in a crisis. Artificial islands, advanced missiles. Large Navy integrated air defense. The United States responds by strengthening alliances. Not building more bases under direct U.S. control, but enabling allies to operate as part of the network. Japan hosts U.S. forces and operates interoperable equipment. South Korea does the same. Australia integrates deeply. Each country adds nodes to the network. The Philippines acquiring F-16Vs signals. Manila is choosing deep integration into this network, rather than strategic ambiguity between Washington and Beijing. Under Duterte, the Philippines pursued hedging. Good relations with both. EDCA sites underutilized. Defense Cooperation Limited. China rewarded this with investment promises and reduced pressure. Under Marcos Jr., the strategic shift is clear. EDCA sites activated. Joint exercises expanded. F-16 discussions accelerate. Chinese pressure increases in response. More harassment, more warnings, more demands that the Philippines choose. Development partnership with China or security alliance with America. But the F-16 represents rejection of that false choice. Because the aircraft enables the Philippines to defend its own interests while integrated with allies. Filipino fishermen can fish. Energy companies can explore. Coast Guard can patrol, not because America defends Philippine interests, but because Philippine capability backed by allied interoperability makes aggression too costly. In a Taiwan crisis, the Philippines does not need to send forces into the fight. Simply possessing credible interoperable capability in Luzon changes Chinese calculations, forces China to allocate resources to the southern flank. Complicates logistics, creates uncertainty. Deterrence works through uncertainty. If China cannot be certain the Philippines stays neutral, cannot be certain U.S. forces do not operate from Philippine bases, cannot be certain Philippine F-16Vs do not complicate air operations, then Chinese planning becomes harder, riskier, more expensive. As of now, the F-16V acquisition remains in negotiation. No signed contract. Funding questions persist. Timeline unclear. If the deal proceeds, delivery would take years. Pilot training in the United States takes 12 to 18 months. Infrastructure at Basa Air Base requires upgrades. Full operational capability would not arrive until late 2020s at the earliest, which means China has time to apply pressure. Diplomatic, economic, strategic. The question is whether that pressure works, or whether it reinforces Philippine perception that capability is necessary. 12 F-16 Vipers, on paper, a small number. In context, a strategic shift. Not because the aircraft themselves threaten China, but because they represent Philippine commitment to a security architecture that constrains Chinese freedom of action. Why is China more worried about 12 jets than 100 tanks? Because tanks defend territory. Jets, when networked and interoperable, defend a strategic position in a regional order. The F-16 Viper is not just an aircraft. It is a strategic choice, a signal, a commitment. For the Philippines, it represents the ability to defend national interests with credible military capability instead of relying solely on diplomacy, international law, or the goodwill of larger powers. For China, it represents one more link in a chain of encirclement. One more node in a network designed to deny China the strategic freedom it seeks. For the region, it represents the ongoing shift in the balance of power. not through one decisive move, but through incremental capability improvements that accumulate into strategic significance. The F-16 deal may or may not proceed. Funding, politics, and Chinese pressure all remain factors. But the strategic logic that makes China concerned is already clear. And that logic will not change regardless of whether this specific acquisition moves forward. Because the question was never really about 12 jets. It was always about where those jets would be based, who they would operate with, and what they would mean for the strategic order China is trying to reshape. This is the reality of small state security in a contested region. Geography matters, alliances matter, and sometimes 12 jets matter more than 100 tanks. Subscribe to Global Pulse for more in-depth analysis on how regional security shapes the Philippines and the Indo-Pacific.